T24'e hoş geldiniz. 13 Türk vatandaşının Gara'da PKK tarafından katledilmesinden sonra ABD'nin PKK ile olan ilişkisi, SDG ile olan ilişkisi tekrar Türk diplomasisinin ana konularından biri haline geldi. Bunu konuşmak için, Suriye'yi konuşmak için, Irak'ı konuşmak için ve ABD'nin yeni Orta Doğu politikasını konuşmak için bugün ABD'nin eski Suriye Özel Temsilcisi James Jeffrey ile beraberiz. Okay, so Mr. Jeffrey, I would like to start with asking, last week 13 Turkish citizens were killed in Gara'da, Iraq, and U.S. Department of State issued a statement about the massacre, but they seem reserved about directly holding responsible PKK for what happened. And later on, after Antony Blinken and Mevlüt Çavuşoğlu talked, it seemed that U.S. changed and they said they affirmed that PKK was responsible. So I would like to ask, why do you think U.S. was skeptical about an official statement made from a NATO ally?
That's a very good question. First of all, my condolences to everyone in Turkey for the loss of the 13 hostages, as well as the 3 soldiers who were involved in the attempt to liberate. There is nothing wrong and everything right about using a military force to try to rescue hostages who have been brought across a border. We all know, and America has supported Turkey for many years on this, that Iraq is incapable of dealing with the PKK and that Turkey conducts routinely, as I said, America has worked with Turkey for many years on this, operations in there. I cannot easily explain the stupid initial press guidance. I was shocked to read it. All I can say is it reflects 2 things. First of all, 3 things. The good news first is that very quickly, the Turkish and U.S. officials at senior levels, beginning with Ambassador Satterfield and, of course, Secretary Blinken, fixed this with the help of Minister Akar and Minister Çavuşoğlu, and that's good. Secondly, it reflects the inexperience of the new team. These are people who, if you look at the White House spokesperson, managed to make fun of our space command. So the next day, the president had to announce that, yes, we actually are going to continue with the space command. And this kind of thing is happening all of the time. It is common in a new administration. But the third thing is, and this is what we need to look into, I know the administration is doing this. I hope it comes to a rapid and correct result. Our relationship with Turkey. There are a great many strains and unhappiness on both sides of this. That feeds into when people are doing rushed press guidance. That was, of course, on a Sunday, on a weekend, and it was a long weekend in the United States, and people had to come out with something very quickly. Those who are biased against Turkey, and they exist in this or any administration, are going to be negative on the country and raise questions, and we do not yet have in place the overarching relationship towards Turkey in the new administration that would beat down these not rare but minority views that creep into things like press guidance.
Okay.
Because the press guidance was not a condemnation of Turkey or a support for the PKK. The problem with it was it kind of put them both on the same level and, well, on the one side and then on the other side. That is characteristic when you have a country that people are ambivalent about. The administration had almost a week before they could say that Israel is an ally of the United States. So you're not alone in this concern about the administration. It doesn't show an underlying rejection. It shows initial lack of experience, and when that is combined with friction with a country, even if it's a very important country, be it Israel, be it Turkey, be it, for example, Germany and Nord Stream, then you get this kind of not particularly well thought out guidance. So my apologies.
Thank you. So next, I would like to, you're one of the most informed people about Syria that was in U.S. diplomacy, and you're really informed about Turkey, as you had spent a lot of time here over the years. So I would like to ask that, as you know, Turkey has been frequently raising concerns about the U.S. giving arms to SDF or YPG. So what are your opinions on this topic?
My opinions are, and I've explained this to Turks 1,000 times, as has President Trump, President Obama, Vice President Biden when he was in office, and various secretaries of state, that the United States is in northeast Syria, working with the Syrian Democratic Forces, who we renamed from the YPG, which is a PKK offshoot in that region, against Daesh, or against the Islamic State. That's why we went in there. At the time we went in there in 2014, Turkey had a different attitude towards the whole thing, and in fact was relatively supportive of the United States moving in and helping the YPG defend Kobani. You'll remember that. Yeah, things changed in 2015, that is true. But the United States is continuing to remain in Syria for two reasons. One is to ensure that Daesh, ISIS, the Islamic State does not return. Secondly, and this is a subtle, not official mission, but very important, former National Security Advisor Bolton wrote about it in great length in his book, to deny terrain from Assad and the Russians. And we do the same thing in the south, where we really don't have a Islamic State at what's called the Al-Tanf perimeter, to deny terrain to Iran, Assad, and Russia in order to put pressure for a diplomatic solution to the Syrian conflict, not very different from what Turkey is doing in Idlib. There is no intent to create a force against Turkey. The United States has worked very hard to ensure that none of those weapons, nor the people we're working with, in any way, shape, or form attack Turkey. And with one exception, in 2019, we saw no attacks from the northeast of Syria into Turkey, other than during the actual operation in October of 2019. So I think we've maintained our commitment to ensure that this doesn't harm Turkey.
And so looking into the future, there's a new government in the United States, and both countries, Turkey has been trying to get understanding of the new government, and the new government kind of had started off harshly with strong statements towards Turkey. But looking towards the future, do you ever see United States and Ankara coming into agreement about SDF's or PKK's status?
No, I'm quite optimistic about the relationship. As this new team becomes more experienced, several things will happen. First of all, it will learn not to make mistakes such as that initial press guidance. In fact, I think it has learned that mistake very, very quickly. It will make different mistakes, but I don't think it will make that one again. Secondly, the administration, like all new administrations, thinks it can do everything. We're a powerful country. We can make countries look like Canada in their domestic behavior, in their treatment of, say, in the case of Israel, the Palestinian community in the West Bank, and at the same time run essentially a global security system where we need partners and allies. Now, the Biden administration is all about diplomacy. It's all about working with, by, and through our partners and allies. The problem is, at the same time, it is advocating very strong human rights and democratization, and many of our partners and allies in the first row against the real threats, which are Iran, Russia, and China, have problems in their domestic behavior. That's the case for Saudi Arabia. That's the case with Egypt. Some people would allege, certainly the European Union, that there are problems with Turkey. It's the case, again, with the European Union with Poland. It's the case with India. It's the case with Vietnam. It's the case with the Philippines. You run out of partners to help contain these real threats to the international community if you can't make a decision which is the more important. I think that this administration will ultimately decide it has to work through its partners to try to maintain the international order. Thus, it will grow closer to Turkey. But that assumes that Turkey, that Ankara and Washington can resolve the one problem that is unique in our relationship since I was involved in it in the early 1980s, and that is the S-400 issue.
And returning to that, I would like to ask, do you ever see United States and Turkey coming to an agreement on the status of SDF?
Look, my feeling is we did that. We came to an agreement with Turkey to have a buffer zone to move the SDF back from the border in August of 2019. The most senior level Turkish authorities decided that in October they didn't like that deal, and you launched a unilateral military operation. The unilateral military operation got a withdrawal of the SDF from that central portion of northeast Syria down 30 kilometers, which was the Turkish call all along. You then went off and negotiated a agreement with the Russians on the other two portions of northeast Syria, where the SDF was also supposed to withdraw. The Russians, unlike the United States, did not live up to that. The SDF is not withdrawn from those areas. That's something for you and Russia to take up. It's not something for the United States and Turkey. We have an agreement signed on the 17th of October. We've lived up to the agreement. Turkey has basically lived up to the agreement. Thus, we stopped the sanctions. So as far as we're concerned, the issue with the SDF is over. The question I have posed to the Turks, and it took me 2 years to do this, but I finally realized, gee, do you want us in northeast Syria, or do you want the Russians and Assad in northeast Syria? That's the first question. Secondly, who is going to take the most effort to ensure that the SDF, to the extent it may try to carry out PKK orders, will not do so? The United States or Russia and Assad? That's your second question. The third question is, the SDF is not an internationally recognized terrorist group, although, as I said, we acknowledge that it is an offshoot of the PKK, which is. Hayat Tahrir al-Sham is an internationally recognized terrorist group. We understand, at least the old administration did, and I suspect the new one does, that for Turkey to be in Idlib, you have to have some kind of informal relationship or something with Hayat Tahrir al-Sham. Otherwise, you can't be there because they're a powerful force, and you have enough military problems there, enough refugee problems without them. So we understand that you it's impossible for you to be there without having some kind of relationship with Hayat Tahrir al-Sham. It's simply because you leave each other alone. The same thing in northeast Syria. We cannot be there without having a relationship with the YPG, now in the SDF. It's that simple. So as far as we're concerned, the issue is over. It was settled in the agreement between Turkey and the United States on the 17th of October, 2019. If the Turks think that we're violating it in some way, then they should talk to Washington. If they have a problem with the SDF around Kobani or the SDF up by the Iraqi border, that's a question for them and the Russians, because they signed an agreement, I think on the 22nd or 23rd of October with the Russians on that. That's a problem between Russia and Turkey, not between Turkey and the United States.
Okay, now looking into the future again, I would like to take your point on this. So after the death of 13 Turkish citizens, there have been talks of military operations. So how do you think the new administration in Washington would react to a unilateral military action, just like it happened last year?
Where?
To Syria.
If it was in the Northeast, where we have an agreement with Turkey and that agreement was violated, the United States would react with extraordinary vigor, just as it acted with extraordinary vigor with sanctions before we signed the agreement. I think that is, and that would be the biggest, stupidest mistake Turkey could make. What are you going to accomplish with that? Are you going to move into the Russian areas?
Now, moving away from Syria a bit, I would like to focus a little bit on Turkey and US relations in general. So one of my favorite quotes is by Abraham Lincoln that goes that a house divided against itself cannot stand. So I know this is in a different context, but Turkey and US are NATO allies, and they have a history that they've been ally for a long while. So how do you think that while there are a lot of topics that two countries differ on right now, this relationship can endure?
Oh, I'm absolutely sure it's going to endure. First of all, I don't think Turkey will make major mistakes such as a large operation in northeast Syria. The agreement now is held for 15 months. That's the first thing. I think that the Biden administration, as time goes on, as it focuses on the real problems internationally, climate change, China, Russia, and an Iran that is not being very cooperative, I think it's going to recognize that Turkey has similar basic interest as the United States. Turkey is a major force blocking Russian expansion. Look at Idlib, look at Tripoli, look at Nagorno-Karabakh. Turkey is no friend of Iran and is no friend of Iran's expansion, particularly in Syria and in Iraq. Turkey has been very clear on that point. And I think the United States is going to see that not only does it share interests with Turkey, but given Turkey's size, its economic power, its very effective military, and its geographic location, you really can't do very much in terms of maintaining security and international order in the Black Sea, Caucasus, Balkan, Middle Eastern area without working with, by, through, and over Turkey. That's simply my experience of trying to do that for many years. How do you think we were able to respond to the Georgian conflict in 2008? It was by working with Turkey, getting ships through the Dardanelles, getting aircraft reconnaissance and other things, flying back Georgian troops. This all required Turkey. Simply a question of airspace, of bases, of the Dardanelles and the Montreux Convention.
And so, going back a few weeks, Interior Minister of Turkey, Süleyman Soylu, said he has given a message that signaled that he said, USA has supported the 15th of July coup attempt in Turkey, and it has been proven in Turkey by statements from generals that Gülenist generals have organized the coup attempt, and taken into context that Fethullah Gülen was never extradited to Turkey. Can you, how would you answer this claim by Süleyman Soylu?
First of all, we listen to the foreign ministry, we listen to the presidency, we listen to the defense ministry. We do not listen to, at least in the Trump administration and in the Obama administration, we do not listen to voices like that. He's wrong. The United States had nothing to do with the coup in 2016. As one of the first people in Washington who pinned the blame on the coup on the Gülenist movement, I can say with certainty that those are the people who did it, and the United States had no relationship with Gülen. Now, Turkey has asked for the extradition of Gülen. The United States has not been able to carry that out. It's a complicated legal question. It's something that the courts would decide. And I know of no one in the last two administrations who thought that the courts would decide to extradite him.
So, while planning to reduce soldiers in Syria, Trump administration continued its operations in oil-rich area of Deir ez-Zor. And recently, Russian press has reported that Biden administration has sent arms and equipment to Elomar oil field. So, do you think, taking this into light, do you think U.S. is going to be more active in Syria under the new government? And if so, how do you think the relationships will move?
Okay, the oil issue. President Trump was persuaded very quickly in October 2019 not to withdraw troops from Syria. For reasons unique to him, he felt most comfortable in justifying that by referring to the oil fields. Now, these oil fields were not ever really defended by the United States, not before or after that. Rather, they were being protected by local security, local police forces and such. who had moved in after the Islamic State, who were controlling those oil fields, were defeated. That was the state before the president's announcement, after the announcement, and now in the new administration, when the military has been formally told that their job isn't to protect the oil fields. Their job is to maintain security in the Northeast so we can continue our presence there and operate against the Islamic State. And at the same time, by our very presence, as I said, deny terrain to Assad, the Iranians, and the Russians. That's what we're doing before. It's what we're doing now. It's what we'll continue doing. The oil field was always a unimportant issue that President Trump felt comfortable citing, but it had really no impact on the ground.
Okay, also, so one of the overarching themes or organizations in your answers is ISIS, which President Trump has claimed that the caliphate, 100% of it was beaten. Do you believe that ISIS is still a threat in Syria?
President Trump was right that ISIS as a territorial caliphate was defeated. That was the unique and very threatening thing about ISIS as a force. Because it had territory, because it had access to those oil fields and many other sources of money, because it had 9 million people at its peak under its command, an army of 30,000, it was able to project terrorist power into Turkey. You've suffered more major attacks by the Islamic State than any other country other than Iraq and Syria. Into Europe with the attacks in Paris in 2015, later in Brussels and in Cannes and in Berlin. We had one attack that was inspired by ISIS in California at the same time. So ISIS presented a unique threat that we all had to work on, and Turkey played a leading role militarily, particularly in the operations in Jarablus and Al-Bab against the Islamic State in 2016. But while it no longer is a territorial state, it remains a classic terrorist movement that occupies ungoverned spaces in Iraq and Syria. That is parts of Iraq, largely along the fault line between the ethnic Kurdish and the ethnic Arab areas in the north of Iraq, but also very, very strongly in the Badia Desert and elsewhere in those areas of Syria beyond the northeast that supposedly are under the control of the Assad regime. But the Assad regime has shown neither capability nor interest in fighting the Islamic State. The Russians, very little interest either. And so that threat remains. And one of the many reasons for having a comprehensive solution to Syria is to ensure that all of us can cooperate together to wipe out the Islamic State in those areas, or sooner or later it will come back.
Okay, and again, to unconfirmed reports in the Arab media that it says that US-led coalition is planning to form a new military base in Syria near Hasakeh. So if this is real, what would a new military base of the US-led coalition in Iraq, Syria, Turkey triangle would mean?
This is, it's a little bit like the oil fields, only even less important. There is a small U.S. force whose numbers are classified, but it is very, very small in northeast Syria. They operate largely along the Hasakah, Kamishli, Dar es-Zor corridor, north-south, and to the east to the Iraqi border. But again, their areas are also, we don't announce them specifically. We clarify that with the Turks and with the Russians, of course. But in operating in that area, people move things around. They turn a base into a helicopter landing pad. They may move some forces in. For example, we moved Bradley armored fighting vehicles into the region in, I think, late October because we were being harassed by Russian patrols and we needed heavier armor to deter the Russians. They've been successful doing that. So you get these major movements. I do not see any significant change in the medium term of the American presence in Northeast Syria, not in its size, its location, what it is doing, who it is doing it with, as the Biden administration works through its Syria policy. The presence of American forces is very widely supported in the United States. We saw that in October of 2019 when President Trump decided to pull them out. There was an immediate, very strong reaction from the vast majority of the U.S. Senate and House of Representatives. I think that's still the case. I see no indication that the Biden administration wants to end the presence there. I see no indication that it wants to expand significantly the presence there either. So I think that for the moment, we will have that presence that we had under the Trump administration.
So just to clarify, would you say that you expect that Biden administration is going to mostly carry on Trump's Syria policy?
No, I wouldn't say that. I would say, first of all, we do not know. They haven't focused much on Syria policy. Secondly, there are certainly some criticisms of Trump's Syria policy. I'll just say two things. It is quite likely, and administration officials have indicated that it is so, that they will continue two important parts of the Trump policy towards Syria, the U.S. military presence in the Northeast and the U.S. presence around Al-Tanf in the South. Secondly, they will continue the sanctions policy, including specifically the Caesar sanctions. Both of these policies are very, very strongly supported by the vast majority of the U.S. Congress, and both of them have been quite effective. Overall, however, Syria policy is subordinate to and falls under one's policy towards Iran to contest Iran's presence in places like Iraq, Syria, Yemen, Lebanon, and to some degree, it is subordinate to U.S. policy towards Russia. The new administration has not quite figured out its overall policy towards either Iran or Russia, and what it does or doesn't do in Syria beyond the sanctions and beyond the military presence will depend on what it concludes on Iran and Russia.
All right. Thank you very much for answering our questions.
Thank you very much.